As you may know, Cedar Talks is a monthly thought leadership series focused on highlighting experienced entrepreneurs, tech innovators, and healthcare leaders who are solving important problems by challenging the status quo. Today's session is a virtual event, and while our speakers can't see or hear the audience, please feel free to use the chat function by entering your question in the Stage tab. We'll try to get to all audience questions as time permits. So this event will conclude in approximately 1 hour, and if you like what you see here, please look out for future Cedar Talks. You can join our mailing list via Cedar's website at www.cedar.com/Cedar Talks. So now that logistics are out of the way, I'm pleased to introduce this afternoon's participants. Leading this interview is Cedar's co-founder and president, Errol Liddau. And I'm ecstatic to introduce today's thought leader, Graham Stanton, co-founder and current advisor to Peloton. During his time at Peloton, Graham started and led the performance marketing and business intelligence teams, fueling Peloton's growth from a small startup to a household name. During his last 18 months full-time at Peloton, Stanton acted as GM of Peloton Digital for its relaunch and continued leading business intelligence team to overhaul all processes in advance of the company's IPO in 2019. Prior to Peloton, Stanton was president of Gifts.com and director of application development at Pronto. Thank you so much for joining us today, Graham. Errol, I'll now hand it over to you.
Great. Well, thanks, Bethany. That was a great introduction. And Graham, a special thank you to you for joining us today. Graham and I have known each other for I think since junior high school, actually. And we were just joking backstage that when Graham actually started down the path of co-founding Peloton, I think the first time he heard me. I heard him talk about the idea. I think, Graham, I may have told you it was a crazy idea. So I need to eat some crow and, hear about your journey and the story behind Peloton. So with that, tell us a little bit about, your path and what ultimately sort of led you to co-found Peloton.
No, absolutely. First off, thanks, Errol. Thanks for reaching out to me and asking me to do this and share the story that I hope is at least remotely valuable for some people. And thank you, Bethany, for a great introduction and running this whole thing here. Errol, if I remember correctly, that was your reaction, that this seemed crazy. This was, we'd both been in more sort of traditional internet businesses, especially in the New York kind of internet marketing type space, and that seemed to be the direction that I was going to go in. And then I ended up at this fitness company, and of course that's not the way I saw it, and it's not the way any of the Peloton co-founders saw it. When Peloton was first pitched to me by Peloton's founder and CEO John Foley, here's someone I'd worked for in the past. My initial reaction was, "Wow, actually, that sounds really great. But are you sure that's a big enough business for you to be involved in?" And then, we stayed in touch. I was a seed investor in Peloton right at the start. I think I was one of 2 or 3 people on the friends and family list for whom the $25,000 seed investment was like all of my savings. But I believed in the founding team and I believed in the idea. And a month later, they asked if I would actually come on board and help out with this crazy idea. And I didn't hesitate. I knew the team. I knew this was something exciting. It seemed very low risk. I mean, kind of, worst case, we'd build something really cool that didn't catch on and we'd be able to move on to the next thing. But what I didn't foresee, and certainly what the other co-founders didn't foresee, was quite how hard it would be. And really the whole way through, but certainly in the early years when really everyone had that reaction. Certainly every investor, where we try to pitch this idea and we'd say this is a stream and digital content business with subscription economics, and it's really exciting. And yeah, they just hear, oh, you're making spin bikes. And then finally they'd ask, oh, wait, where does this content come from? And say, oh, that's the best part. We're opening our own spin studio. And all these software VCs would kind of end the conversation right there. So yeah, that wasn't at all what I expected, but I guess that's what it is. And there are always new challenges. And on the flip side, thankfully, the product and the service ended up, beyond our wildest dreams.
Yeah, yeah. And how did you guys come up with the idea for it in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was the core idea. Obviously, there's a lot fleshed out over time, but the core idea was all John. And it was, he's told the story, and it's absolutely true. It grew out of his personal obsession with the studio cycling classes in New York City. He was obsessed taking a bunch. His wife Jill was obsessed taking a bunch. And they would be on their computers right at the right time slot every week for when classes opened up, and the most popular classes would fill up in the first minute or faster, suggesting a big mismatch of supply and demand. And John happened to be president of e-commerce at Barnes & Noble at the time when they were launching the Nook product, and he was able to kind of connect the dots about what technology can do, and see this seriously unmet need. And as luck would have it, I had just gotten into taking cycling classes myself in the previous year, so I got it. Our co-founders, Hassao and Tom, had been taking these classes for many years. Tom had used it to train for an Ironman, and it just totally made sense to us, enough to convince the fifth co-founder, Yoni, to come on board and be the founding CTO. But yeah, it was a long slog to then convince the rest of the tech community that this doesn't sound like traditional tech, but it's actually a really big tech opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like you guys had this really, really big, kind of crazy sounding vision from day one. But you really struggled to kind of convince both investors and sort of the rest of the tech community that this was a real thing. I mean, how did you go about actually building out the team and the sort of first version of the bike? What was the first sort of year like?
And it was a lot of time late in the office writing code. We had printed circuit boards all over the place. We didn't have experience in anything we were doing really, but we just pressed on. And thankfully it turned out Yoni is a brilliant engineer. And even though he had no Android experience and very limited kind of hard electronics experience, he was able to figure out how to get a custom build of Android on a custom device that's not a phone. That wasn't really designed to be running the Android operating system. I had been a developer at one point in my career, and even though I was nominally on board to do the more businessy side things, I learned how to code Android and actually built a lot of the original Android app myself. We brought on a couple more early developers, one through personal connections, and one we somehow managed to convince to join us. But yeah, for a while, just as it was hard to raise money, it was hard to convince developers that yes, we really are a tech company and we really are going places. And no, you're not just working for some like fitness equipment manufacturer.
Yeah, yeah. And having used a Peloton bike, I mean, the design of the bike is just fantastic, and the entire user experience. And how did you guys go about it sounds like a lot of you guys had sort of experience in the software space, but how do you know this is going to turn out to be a great user experience?
It really just, I think it was just because we insisted on it. So we worked with a really great UI UX designer right from the start. Someone we'd worked with before who had a lot of experience in internet software, and we really just focused on the end user experience. We built it for ourselves, for our families, for people we know, and it was kind of an easy situation where our competition really was the fitness equipment manufacturers who, at least at the time, had no idea what they were doing. And on the flip side, the tech companies were never looking at the fitness space. And so on the software, we just insisted on it. And on the hardware, we found the right partners. And again, insisted this thing can't look like a clunky piece of gym equipment. It has to be something you're happy to put in your living room. When we had questions about that we didn't know how to answer, like, should we make this white or black? Because we knew we didn't want it to be anything like too bold because it had to blend in a little bit. We just emailed about 30 people and asked for feedback, and it was almost unanimous black, so it was black. It was like we moved quickly, and we learned what we needed to do, and thankfully at the time, when we were a very small team, we didn't feel the need to hire some consulting firm and go through a very long process for every tiny little decision.
Yeah. And was your vision always to start your own cycling studio, or did you guys try and partner with the sort of Soul Cycles of the world as well?
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, so much of the way the company is today, what really did align with the original vision. The original vision had at least one studio. Even there was an idea that we'd have someone driving a van around delivering bikes.
Really?
So
that was part of the original vision. Yeah, that's amazing.
That was. I mean, I think it was like one friend of ours we had in mind would be driving this van, but it was kind of built into it. But it's a good question, and of course, we approached the other studios with this idea, the established studios with this idea that maybe we're cable TV and you're HBO or something like that. But never really got through anywhere. And in fact, my co-founder Tom and I were unceremoniously removed from SoulCycle one day. When we were told that we just kind of weren't welcome in that community. A long time ago, none of the people involved then are involved now.
How did that happen? You said you're unceremoniously removed from SoulCycle. Did they literally come and kick you out of SoulCycle classes?
I got a call on my cell phone while when I was already at the studio before I went in, letting me know not to go into class. My co-founder, I believe, went into class, even though I told him the message I'd received. He took the attitude of, well, they didn't say anything to me. He went into class, and the front desk person followed him in and tapped him on the shoulder.
Wow. Well, I think it's safe to say that you guys survived that. But can you talk a little bit more about sort of how you got the actual hardware for this figured out and built? This is something I'm personally fascinated with, as someone who's spent a lot of time in software engineering. But I think there are a lot of people in our engineering team who are kind of software engineers, but who are very interested in sort of the hardware world. What was this like? How do you even figure out someone to manufacture the bike for you and all that?
Yeah, I think that in hindsight, it's easy to say that the way it worked was the only way it could have worked, and that might be true. And I think for us at the beginning, it was actually very helpful that none of us had any experience in this, and which meant that we were really flexible and adaptable. And we found the right bike manufacturer. I think it was John and an early friend of the company went out to a trade show in Taiwan and looked at all the bikes and said, "Oh yeah, this bike here, this has everything we need." They introduced themselves to the representatives of the factory, and we got that relationship there. We found a design partner in New York to come up with the look and help manage that relationship. On the tablet side, I mentioned we had PCBs all over the office. We tried all sorts of different sources, and we eventually found, it's small as far as manufacturers go, really big for us. Kind of phone and tablet manufacturer, also in Taiwan, who could do the design and manufacturing. And so they were a great partner. We could kind of just say, we want it to look like this. It needs to have these features. We'll order this many, and somehow, even though John couldn't convince any investors, he was able to convince the chairman of this firm that this crazy ragtag group would actually follow through and deliver on these orders. But yeah, if we'd known what we were doing, we'd have run too long of a process. We probably would have gone to more established, bigger, harder to work with partners. But we just focused on, well, if we don't get this done, the business doesn't work. So we kept it small, we kept it friendly, and flexible, and it was what we needed at the time.
Yeah. So how long was it from the sort of founding of the company to when you guys actually had your first bike manufactured?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had so the company was founded really early 2012, and we had the first real almost complete sort of engineering verification test bike by mid 2013, and they were in people's homes by the end of January 2014. So it was kind of a 2-year journey there, but really, it accelerated in the middle there. So maybe about 18 months.
Yeah, that's really amazing that you guys were able to do something completely from scratch in the hardware space, almost not knowing anything at all about hardware, and get it into people's homes within 18 months. So from the point that you guys actually had the first bike made, how do you go about actually telling people about it and convincing people to use it?
Well, yeah, that was that was a learning experience, and thankfully, we could kind of lean on our internet marketing background there a little bit. But we knew we just had to get the word out. So we ran a Kickstarter campaign, which we thought would be kind of a great initial splash. It was helpful in that it was the anchor for our original press, and then that built. I think we sold 188 bikes through the Kickstarter campaign. So I mean, it was, we hit the goal. We technically hit the goal, but it wasn't really what we'd hoped for there. It turns out there wasn't a perfect alignment of the Kickstarter community, the Peloton community, at least at the start. But we were opportunistic. We'd put in inquiries for where we could put little stands in high traffic areas where we thought our initial target demographic might be, and we thought our initial target demographic was people who lived in houses big enough to easily house a bike, but who worked in the city and got the indoor cycling community here. So we're thinking Grand Central or out in the suburbs somewhere, and we lucked out. The Short Hills Mall got in touch with us and said, well, we can't really let you have a stand in the middle, but we've got a really high-end store where the tenant just declared bankruptcy, and they're vacating for really low rent. Would you like to move in? And we said yes, and we used their fancy build out, and we just put a Peloton logo over it and started selling there. And that ended up being a big piece of kind of our early sales. So it was really just get in front of people, use word of mouth, and it was, it was slow. It was slow going, but gone.
Yeah, I'm sure investors loved that you decided to go brick and mortar also from day one.
Oh yeah. Yeah, certainly all those
But,
internet company VCs. So that's exactly what they want to hear.
Yeah, you guys. Yeah. And was the first bike actually delivered in a Peloton van?
No. After all that, I mean, yeah, we did a couple of our own deliveries for certain VIPs, but we initially went through a third party.
Yeah.
I think their successor company Peloton still works with, but yeah, it was, and they helped us scale and they did great. And it was over time we realized that no, we really want to kind of control the experience the whole way through.
Yeah, yeah. One thing you guys did a truly amazing job at was really building kind of a culture and community around your product. Can you talk a little bit? Was that purposefully done? Did you guys set out to really build the kind of cult following and the community that you have today, or did that sort of evolve organically over time?
Oh, that 95% evolved organically over time. We certainly had this idea that like the local spin studio is like gets a community around it, and we thought that there's got to be some way to harness this, and we built some social features into the application itself to kind of facilitate it, but the community really sprung up as an independent Facebook group. We didn't start it. It started growing rapidly, and it ended up being a really kind of important thing for a lot of Peloton members. And we actually offered. We got in touch with the founder of that group and asked if maybe they wanted it to hand it over to us, and not have to manage it anymore. And they agreed, so it became the official Peloton member group. But yeah, that was started by the members, those people finding each other. And so really kind of from our standpoint, the trick turned out to be figuring out what we needed to do to support them and to support this community and allow it to grow. And yeah, we didn't need to do much to fuel the growth. It was more how do we be helpful?
Yeah. So how did you guys engage with the community? Like, did you just sort of let it evolve on its own, or did you guys, try and sort of steer the community in any way, or how do you actually work with your community?
Yeah, it's a lot of it, at least at first, a lot of it was reactive. But today there's a whole team dedicated to it. But and that built up over the years. But in the early days, it was noticing that this Facebook group exists, so help them out. They started organizing their own meetups, and they usually chose the local Peloton store. And so it's all right. Well, let's make sure we've got stuff there to welcome the community. And then we realized if people wanted to meet in stores, and maybe we could start doing some events where an instructor would show up or something like that. But we're more enabling what people were already doing organically. And I think the most extreme example of that was what is now called Peloton Homecoming, which of course hasn't happened in a couple of years now, but when thousands, a couple of years ago, thousands of people descended on New York for a very official series of events. But it was initially called the Home Rider Invasion, and it literally was 20-something people flying from all over the country, going to the studio together, and then showing up at our office. And we gave them a little tour of this kind of small office, and needed to scramble to figure out how to entertain them. And then, we coordinated another one a few months later, and it turned into a very official thing. But it was all leaning into what the community was already self-organizing.
Yeah, that's just amazing that the community kind of self-organized around the experience of Peloton. So fast forwarding a bit. So you guys started the company sort of 2012, took 18 months to get your first bike sort of made and into homes. At some point you guys had to sort of branch out and do more than just bikes. You guys started actually launching new products. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like? One thing that I've seen throughout my career is that companies usually tend to get really, really, really good at one thing or sort of one product, and then it's really hard for them to move on to the next thing. So how did you guys figure out how to innovate despite the incredible growth you're having with your bikes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I think we needed to at least from my perspective, we needed to get a real sense of kind of what was Peloton about. And then it is true that in the early days we had this very complete vision around the bike, but we didn't know for sure what was special about Peloton, and that's why we talked briefly about how we approached other spin studios, like would you maybe provide content? I think in an early deck we had this idea of user generated content where people could be star instructors from home, and because we didn't know, like, is it the hardware that's special? Is it the software? Is it the platform? Or is it the Peloton content itself? And ultimately, I think we realized that it's the whole package and the experience. And that gave us the grounding we needed to then realize, oh, well, actually, then this works. This will work for a tread. And it was, if we'd start at the beginning, if we'd started with multiple products at the start, I think, we wouldn't have known kind of what needed to be like the true essence of Peloton that needed to carry through and what could change. But once we had that confidence, we were able to jump right in, and we focused on great classes with great music that really delivered that Peloton instructor-led experience. I think that worked out very well, and I'm very happy to have one of each.
Yeah. And throughout that period, I mean, I imagine that your growth curve must have just been insane, from the moment you launched that first bike. Did it always feel like you were winning from the point that you launched that first bike, or did it feel like kind of a struggle from the inside?
Yeah, I mean, it was, there were definitely periods of struggle. And it's funny because you're right, like we were on exponential growth the entire time. And that certainly was a lesson. And it's a lesson that, that I took. And I think really, investors need to take, which is that exponential growth can take a while. I remember having discussions with existing or potential investors in 2015, when they would ask, they'd say, something doesn't add up. I'd say, like, we can see this product, it is amazing. You say it's amazing, and it is. We talked to the members, they absolutely love it. The testimonials are phenomenal. But why have you sold so few bikes? Clearly, you guys are doing something dramatically wrong here, because you should have sold millions of these things. And that, at that point, I think we were well, there are multiple stages, but I remember having this conversation when we'd sold, I think, 15,000 bikes or something. And the reality was we were at the early point of the curve on exponential growth. So, if we were going, if we're growing a few times each year, like, compounding growth really, can really make that a very big number. And I certainly learned that on the marketing side of it. It's, at least for us, it's like virtually impossible to force that. There was always kind of like a natural level of growth. If we ever tried to get clever and say, I think we could pour gasoline on the fire with some ginormous ad budget, it would fall flat. We could only ever like gently encourage the natural growth. And I think there was a need of a lot of word of mouth, people at different stages of openness to the idea. So there's obviously the adoption curve of the early adopters and everything, but there's lots of stages along there, and there are the people who needed to see it more established in society for a little while, or needed to see their friends with it, and needed to get those in-person testimonials. And so a little bit of marketing could help push them over the edge. But no amount of marketing could do that if they didn't have that context. And it was just kind of a slog of like, we know we want to be at this really big number. At this rate, we're kind of like years away from it, and we have investors doubting us, and of course everything is hard, but it was always counterbalanced by the idea that we knew the product was great and we loved it ourselves, and we wanted to hold faith.
Yeah. So was there like a particular turning point where you and the rest of the founding team were just like, aha, like we know that this is going to be huge now. Like, we know that this is going to work, where it flipped from feeling like a struggle to like, you guys feeling very confident about the future of the company?
I think it was, we always knew the product would work. And I think when we got to a point of, there was a turning point of, well, we just raised money, and a much more painful process than we would have liked. But the cash came in the door. We had supportive investors, and we'd always had this feeling that the biggest risk to the company was capital risk, and kind of together with the degree of difficulty for everything we were trying was always greater than we expected it to be. The amount of capital we needed was always greater than we expected it to be, especially early on. So that was the good moment of, okay, well, now we can relax. Like, we've got to work really, really hard, but we don't need to be, concerned we're going to go out of business any point in the near future. And then after that, it finally started to get a little bit easier when we were becoming more, there was more awareness of Peloton. We were becoming more of a household name. But only easier in the sort of the angst standpoint, that the level of effort required to do anything and to move forward, like, only ever seemed to go up.
Yeah. And throughout that time, you personally were running a bunch of different parts of Peloton sort of internally. I think you were doing the marketing and as well as sort of the finance and the data side, kind of the data analytics and business intelligence behind it. Can you talk a little bit about, did you guys ever, use data in clever ways to try and kind of improve the customer experience or the actual product in any way?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think we had a good balance there, of really good instincts. My co-founder Tom, and now of course John, had a very clear vision around the product, and we all used it ourselves. So that kind of helped center things. And then as we built out the product team, we got a we got a really good process for getting feedback directly from members. But from very early on, we were looking at dashboards. We had data on how everything was used, and absolutely we tested assumptions, and really wanted to uncover what is it that people are trying to do that they can't, and what's the adoption of this new feature. And I mean, I was focused on marketing, and it was kind of funny that we started a data warehouse to really power our internet marketing operation, but it evolved. I mean, I think because I was also doing finance, it ended up being sort of the main data warehouse for the company, and it ended up being a really helpful tool to answer product questions. That then was a springboard to an actual product analytics team forming that could tailor things to their specific needs. But yeah, data was in there and looked at from very early on.
Yeah. I don't know if you're comfortable sharing, but like as a product company ourselves at Cedar, like we're kind of obsessive with how to use data to kind of drive the evolution of our product. Are there any particular kind of insights that you got from seeing the data of how people are actually using the product that actually led to decisions about how the product should develop? Are there any sort of specific examples you'd be comfortable sharing?
Yeah, it's I think the most useful ones were when we had there was maybe there's some serendipity of this create really interesting reports and be surprised, but certainly when we ask pointed questions of the data, we'd get the most useful feedback. And like one example would be like when we launched, and for a while we did mostly 45-minute classes, and that's the standard for your local spin studio. And we found that and we had a handful of shorter ones, and we could see that people were seeking out the shorter classes, or they were taking the 45-minute ones and maybe ending a little early. And that was something that in hindsight makes total sense. If you have to drive to your local studio and drive back, and it's a whole investment. Maybe it's an hour in terms of like getting dressed, getting in your car, like all of that. Maybe it's an hour round trip added that you got to make the class worth your investment there. But when the product's in your house, you want to jump on the bike even if you don't have 45 minutes. But that's not something that, it should have, but it's not something that occurred to us right from the start, and that data was very clear about that one.
Yeah. Cool. Well, switching kind of topic of conversation for a minute, what advice would you give to someone on the team at a company like Cedar, around 200 people and growing very quickly?
Yeah.
And what would you wanted to have known yourself kind of going through that growth phase at Peloton?
Yeah. Well, first off, I'd say it's exciting, and congrats on being in that position. And and just be prepared for things to change. I mean, they have to, because the challenge just keeps increasing, and it accelerates. I think because kind of the organizations like build on themselves. At one point, I joked that like every year it felt like I was working at a totally different company. And I was ready to like make that joke again. I was, well, wait a second. Actually, I think it's now every 6 months. And it was all because growth of a company leads to growth of the company. That's you didn't used to have you didn't used to have the head of one function, and you hire that person. Well, now they need a team, and well, now the other teams work with them, and now they need to bulk up just to interact with them. And well, now the way the company operates needs to mature, because now there are so many more people and there's so many more teams, and there's so much, that you can't have n squared interaction. So now you need more formal process about how things actually get done. Well, now you're able to hire the people who are really good at that process, which then opens new doors. And the advice I'd give is take it as an opportunity to learn. It's a heck of a crash course in how bigger companies operate. Like, do what you can to stay a step ahead and learning. What do I need to know, in order to be successful in the organization the way it is today. But be open to it. And it means that everyone's individual role changes, and usually that means the day-to-day work gets narrower for most people, but more. It's kind of like smaller piece of a bigger pie, but it's even better than that because there's the opportunity to learn from so much more of the company as a whole and of all the people around you. And so I think, I look back at kind of my journey at Peloton and, my colleagues, and I think most people were pretty good at that. And the ones who really succeeded were the ones who put in all the effort to learn, okay, well, how do I do my job today? Because the way I did it yesterday no longer applies.
Yeah. And how did you, did you try and kind of shape the culture of the company as it evolved? Like, did the culture itself change?
Thankfully the culture itself did not really change. And that was partly a conscious effort. It came from the co-founders, I think, to some extent, and that we really kind of had strong opinions about some core principles. But from early on, we would run processes where the team as a whole, or key people from the team as a whole, would be able to set the values and set the culture. And it ended up being very collaborative. And so I say, kind of came from the co-founders, and still, still I know John believes very strongly in this, but it was never dictatorial. This has to be the way it works, because that certainly would have failed. It was more about, this is what we're hearing, and this is then how that, filters through our vision of that, and now we're learning how to change here. But I think that the values are what the people believe, and that ends up being kind of set, and then the culture can evolve around it, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's so important to sort of create an autonomous culture where people have good judgment. That's one of our core values at Cedar. Maybe in the last few minutes before we open up for questions, Graham, so you had an incredible journey with Peloton. You ended up actually moving into an advisory role with the company, I think a little bit shortly after the IPO. Maybe you could talk just about what it was like leading up to the IPO. That's something that I think very few people experience in your position in life. And then if you're comfortable, I know you're kind of in stealth mode with your new company, but I think love to hear what you're up to now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it thankfully all fits together in the questionnaire. It ended up, the timing worked out really well. And we talk about like that kind of belief. Yeah, what was the initial belief in Peloton from the very start? And when I joined, I was, and I didn't mention, I was pretty dead set on starting my own company. And I was like fully persuaded that, oh, well, these are the people I'd want to work with anyway. So absolutely, I'll join Peloton. I'm the founding team of Peloton, and worst case scenario, this doesn't work out in a few years, and then I'll start my own. And yeah, so that was always in the back of my mind. Okay, well, how can I actually apply everything I've learned here to the next thing? But yeah, it was very clear as we were going up to toward the IPO, starting more than a year out from it, that a lot of the stuff I'd worked on wasn't quite IPO ready. And so that was just a very involved effort throughout the company to get core systems to be SOX compliant. The data warehouse and the business intelligence team that sat on top of it had started almost as like a pet side project of mine, but then had grown into actually providing a lot of the key data that Peloton used for internal and external reporting. And it needed to be a lot more than a pet side project. And I kind of viewed that as a personal responsibility of it, not that I need to deliver this, but I need to be very active and doing my part to help everyone get there. So that was a learning experience for me. It was a lot, in a sense, it was a lot of fun because it was a totally new challenge. And we had that ready for IPO, and I stuck around for about 6 months beyond IPO, really to kind of see that yes, okay, and the system works, and we got 2 more quarters in, and I think I ended up actually leaving the company about 15 months after I communicated internally that would be the plan, and then started Avise, kind of growing out of that, thinking about all the early frustrations of how like QuickBooks was great but didn't quite fit our needs, and ERPs were never what I'd hoped for. So at Avise, it's kind of core accounting software. The idea is it should be as easy to use as Peloton software, very straightforward, but it's real. It's designed for real accountants. I think the ERP migration was a nightmare and a very painful experience, and I think that's universal for everyone who goes through it. We're trying to make it so that at Avise, if you plug in Avise can be your new system without any migration. It just works. You could go public. We support everything you need there. You don't need a separate business intelligence team necessarily. It can be kind of the core system for that. We're early stages, but we're at about 8 people now. We actually have the same designer as the original UI designer for Peloton, excited to be kind of right at the start again, but also excited to look forward and go through the growth, hopefully one more time, and actually know what to expect this time.
Peloton for accountants. I like it. Great. So in the last 10 minutes, let's move on to a few audience questions that people submitted. So I think that the first one here is, when I think of Peloton, I think of great community and content. Did you hold back on delivering the first orders until you had a sufficient amount of orders and content library?
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds like a very well thought out, good go-to-market plan. Which of course we didn't follow and didn't know about such things. We're very eager just to get it out. So we delivered those 188 Kickstarter bikes, got them in people's homes, and we built a makeshift all black studio in the back of our office, where we had we didn't have enough Peloton bikes to fill that, so we got cheap $300 bikes off Amazon, and we set up a camera in there and some pretty cheesy lighting, and we got classes running, and yeah, we just didn't charge anyone for their subscription for about 6 months because we know we weren't proud enough of the content until we actually opened the studio and we're doing it for real.
Yeah. Are there things that you think the broader healthcare provider community could learn from Peloton's business model and the highly engaged community that you've built around wellness and fitness?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I hope so. I obviously don't know exactly how anything would translate, but I think that like none of us were like experts in fitness or wellness, but we focused on a really great experience and made sure it was fun. And like I know from like my own personal experience of like always going through like to be active and healthy for however many months at a time and then stop and then restart. And like since Peloton's been the only time I've ever been at all consistent in that, and it's because it's fun. And we felt pretty good about the subscription model being tied to something people like and enjoy. And it's not like gamification, gimmicky fun, but like it's something where you take a class, you feel phenomenal at the end of the class. Like you really enjoy it, and you look forward to the adrenaline rush every time you do it. And at least that was my takeaway in terms of the health side. That the best workout is the one you do, and so focusing on the experience rather than necessarily the science of this exactly what's going to make you the fittest and healthiest. And thankfully, it tends to align pretty well. But I guess experience first.
Yeah. One thing that stood out to me from everything that you said is, I mean, you guys just built a fantastic product, and you said that if you guys spent $1 million on advertising, it wouldn't even change really the trajectory of the growth. It was growing organically on its own. So, I guess what I personally took away is ultimately, if you have a good enough product that's truly remarkable, where people will sort of recommend it on their own, then you end up with exponential growth to begin with. And the best thing you can do is sort of foster that growth.
Yeah, and that was definitely the lesson I took. I mean, the marketing can accelerate it a little bit, but certainly, I mean, just thinking from past lives and doing internet marketing stuff, I always got the sense that no amount of marketing can accelerate growth of something that's terrible.
Yeah.
And you have to start at least with a good product.
Yeah. So for healthcare providers, start with a good product and great experience for your patients.
That's a good one. Pretend I said that.
All right. Next question. The coaches and trainers have such a fantastic blend of fitness knowledge combined with motivational psychology. What does Peloton look for when recruiting these people?
I mean, I can't speak to Peloton's hiring process today. I'm not too close to it, but I can say certainly early on, we're looking for personalities. And it was there's a lot of overlap between who could teach a great in-person class and be a great instructor on the stream, but it's not exactly the same thing. And so it was like so there's people who are really into it, people who are authentic. It's tough to fake. People are like genuinely good people and kind of interesting on their own terms that way. And I mean, we ran lots of auditions, and I had to go through a lot of people before we kind of figured out what the right mix was. I'd say authentic, high energy, warm, genuinely fun kind of ahead of everything else in terms of being like, a superstar instructor, like outside of Peloton or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah. And what was it? How did you even go about recruiting the first the first instructors? Was that a hard thing to do in the early days?
Oh yeah, yeah. We initially got word out that we'd pay dramatically more than any of the local studios. I think we said, do the math. You fill your classes, and you prove you're a really popular instructor. Like you'll make $300,000 a year. When I think that at the time a typical instructor, would make a small fraction of that, even a really good one. And one of my co-founders joked that his wife told him he needed to quit his job as COO of the company and become an instructor immediately. But I think that announcement got us one instructor who was even then more interested in the concept than just that payday. No one believed it. And the right instructors weren't driven by that anyway. But yeah, we got the word out. We worked with multiple people who had really deep connections to the local community. We ran lots of people through. We got some experienced instructors in, and we had some people who weren't even fitness instructors, but were dancers, and so they had rhythm, they had personality, and they could be trained. And a few of the instructors still at Peloton today that kind of came out of that program where they hadn't even been fitness instructors before.
Yeah. All right, one last question, and then we're gonna let you go. And this is a hard question. Read this. Some products serve as catalysts that entirely change consumer behavior in industries. The iPod changed the way that people listen to music. So high bar here, but what do you hope or predict Peloton's products and community will change when it comes to the way that we engage in digital health communities?
Wow. Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I think at least, certainly for I hinted at this before, like certainly for myself and people I know, the Peloton members I know, I think it already has shifted how people approach their own health. And so, I hope Peloton helps kind of get the word out what fit people and athletes have always known, but the rest of us haven't really understood that in order to be really healthy, you kind of need to be active all the time. And in order to be active, or at least heavily active, and in order to be active, like being active needs to be fun. It needs to be something you enjoy, and unless you have way more discipline than I do. So I think, and I hope that's the shift. I hope the shift is that people can now be more purpose. It can be a much broader adoption of being purposefully active, caring about health that way, and doing it because it's fun and something you look forward to, and not a chore that you feel you have to do.
Yeah, that's great advice for all of us. I think we're at time now, but Graham, on behalf of the Cedar community, thank you so much for joining us here today and sharing your story with all of us. I think it's truly inspiring to hear how you can quite literally change the world and change the way that the people behave. So thank you again for joining us here today. And thank you to everyone who attended and asked questions as well. We really appreciate your participation today. And on that note, thank you everyone, and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Graham. I think the leave button here.